Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tropica Trade Group, and this is your end of day recap for Monday, December 4th. A little bit of a kind of quiet, sleepy way to start the week, but there was definitely some interesting moves for the day, and we'll go through those. First of all, I think where we kind of left off on Friday in terms of what I thought was most interesting was a lot of rotation that we started to see at the back end of last week. That kind of continued today, and if you look at the averages for the day, both the S&P, so SPY, and the Qs were down for the day, with the Qs leading a bit lower, down almost 1%. Now, moved off the lows for the day, which is, I think, a good sign. But where the strength was and where the rotation is going into small caps and just into some other areas. Again, those magnificent seven names, or I call them great eight, they've been a little bit of a hiding place for the markets. They've acted really well, but it's logical to me to see some profit taking in those names. So before we get into those names and a few other names that I wanted to go over in today's video, I figured we'll go over excuse me, some levels in the indices to watch. So what we're looking at here is S&P futures, just a plain old daily chart. And notice that on the first day of the trading month, and probably in hindsight, kind of thought it was first of the month flows that were kind of coming in, that we sometimes see, and I think that's kind of confirmed based on that price action, and where we saw a lot of areas go up on Friday. Today, you have a kickback and kind of, or move back into the value area. So that means that, when we're inside value, it kind of means that we're range bound a little bit. When we're breaking above, we're in more of a price discovery situation. And when we're breaking below, we're more of a breakdown situation. So, we're not far from that top of value, but I would pay attention to what happens here. Right, that first move I would say, is rejected. Now, again, one day is not a trend, but I would watch to see if we lose this, what happens with this 5-period moving average, right, and see if we get any continued downside. So again, I'm kind of jumping to that, but again, I'm just kind of planning the next moves out. Right, we always run a scenario analysis of hey, what's going to happen if we continue to higher. First of all, the level that I'm watching is this 45.91.25, right? And we'll see if we can overcome that tomorrow, because it's very close. But if not, then you've got to think about what is going to happen next. So that's why I didn't really do too much today. On a day where we moved back inside the value area, I didn't really add major risk. I kind of shuffled in and out of a couple positions, but ultimately it was not a big trading day for me. I day traded just a little. I had one day trade for the day. Also, if you notice, the 1 hour chart, and we have a new value area for this week. Again, this value area is based on all of last week's activity, and notice how we're honoring it. Right, we made a little bit of a higher low, right, and we tested that bottom of value. That was a chart that I sent out earlier in the day. So that's very, like, these are very easy decisions to make, right? If we stay above, or around these levels, even better if we can get above this top of value, which we're not able. Notice that we started the week here, broke in. And if we break this 45.53, right, that's an easy decision to be like, hey, I'm lightening up on risk. If we can manage to get back above, and I started to say that we tried to get back above the value area, and we couldn't do it. So that's 45.75. So again, this is not the end of the world. Really what I would pay attention to is this bottom of value. We break that, and things can get a little bit could get a little dicey in the short term, right? This is not long-term stuff. This is just watching, being mindful of how many swing trades you have on and your risk and so on and so forth. The Qs kind of touch that 20-day moving average. I don't know if they need to fill this gap in here, but that's a test of the 20-day moving average. And for now, bouncing on it, right? So that's not bad. Now, this is a break below that 5-period moving average that I talked about with the SPY chart. Notice that price has been above here for more than a month. So that's really the first break of the 5-day moving average in about a month. So that's a little bit of a change in, we lost price. or the Qs lost some momentum, I would say, to put it right, the right way. And we're also inside the value area for the month of December. So we're in some digestion zone for now for the Qs, more deeply inside the value area than SPY. And there's something a little bit different too. Right, different than that SPY chart or S&P chart that I just showed you, is that price in the beginning of the day broke this value area like no problem. There's my little sound effect. We took out this virgin point of control, which is just from a couple weeks ago, and we're hanging around here. So this is not a great place to be. Below the value area for the week. So again, echoing why I didn't really do anything. I didn't really get involved in, buying the dip other than for like, one day trade that I took. But that's where we stand. So, could this lead to more problematic issues? It could. And I think the level that, for me, I'll be a little bit more defensive in this area of the market unless we regain 387.93. Now let's talk about the bright spot, because again, you look at those two charts and you're like, not so great, right? But the small gaps are what's driving the market right now, and that's two really nice days of gains. Remember, all the week's gains last week, because small caps led last week, but that was just based on one day. And I always find this kind of interesting that, when you look at a week's gain, when you look at the week's returns, sometimes it's just one day, right? And that's basically what happened last week, is that IWM gained 2.9% last week. On Friday, right? And I think it finished up like 3.1%. And then we have another day where we tacked on. So I did get long the small cap ETF last week. I took another target today. Right? Here's what I did. Took another target in this today. That's actually my third target for this. Again, I don't this is just a trade for me, because I know that the small caps are sideways. So, I took two targets in the trade on Friday, and then I took another target today. Right. And so for now, right, it looks like a lot of rotation, right? Because not everything was going down today. And that's a pretty wide spectrum of move in terms of what IWM did versus what the Qs did. So that's a difference of like 2%. So that's a big difference between the indices. All right. So that's and also I wanted to bring up this, notice the two other charts, the S&P and the Qs are the S&P's at the top of value, the Qs are below value, and this is ranging up here. And really, my last target's going to be this 189. It's 188.99 on the 1 hour chart, and that's all that I think I'm really going for. I don't think I'm going to aim for this VPOC up there, but we'll see. We'll see when I get there. Because this is a little bit more of a lower conviction trade for me. I mentioned the Great 8. I wanted to go over just a couple. I'll go over three of those charts really quickly. Apple, because Apple did make a nice move from the lows. Notice since that virgin point of control takeout, which is right up here, right, which is where a lot of volume previously occurred, but we have not revisited. We took this thing out, and I thought that might be after a huge run up, and that's a lot of times how virgin point of controls work, is that after you've made that type of a move, when we reach up and take out that VPOC, it usually means that there's some digestion on the horizon, and that's what we have now. We haven't broken down or anything like that. We're just pausing a little bit. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with a pause after the move we've had, right? This might set up for another like higher. I would watch that 192.35. And if you have a lot of conviction in Apple, there's nothing wrong with trying a trade versus, in my opinion, versus the 20-day moving average, and then having, putting your stop there, right there under. If I said that correctly. Microsoft is another one, because Microsoft is one of my favorites out of this group, right? And it did kind of come into this 361.80 level That's the bottom of value, so pretty quickly, from where this kind of topped out and reversed. I think that was Wednesday of last week, right? And then we started to see this move down below the 5-period moving average and below the 20-day moving average. Again, not something that's been done since October, right? To see a move below the 20-day moving average. So, definitely a change in tone here. I didn't go long this, even though I kind of wanted to, just because of that view that my view in the Qs right now. But ultimately, I think this will be a good buying opportunity. I think Microsoft, for me anyway, is one of those names where I'm going to want to buy the dip. I just don't know if today's the day that I want to do it. Also, one other thing that I wanted to mention in this seasonality. Remember, right? Everybody gets all hopped up about the Santa Claus rally, but you should know that the Santa Claus rally is just the last week of the year and the first 2 days of January. So if you're placing trades now for this, thinking that you're catching the Santa Claus rally, we're a long way away from that, and we might see a little bit of seasonal weakness, this week, and then maybe it straightens out. So, I think that just to be realistic right now about the market. And then the other one, the last one in this group, which I wanted to go over, is NVIDIA. Interesting, when I put this in, and when you put this in perspective, right? People don't like when I do this, but over the last several months, basically since July, believe it or not, NVIDIA, which I know is a market leader, it's up huge for year to date. But in the last 3 or 4 months, it's what have you done lately for me, which is not much, right? Because the stock hasn't done anything since July, right? Here's where we've been since July, already, making a big run. Now, of course, there's been things to, you could have made money, trading the bottom of the range, but overall, since the beginning of July, NVIDIA hasn't gone anywhere. So I know it's a name that I'll continue to watch and look for dips to buy, but I made the right decision last week when I saw this begin to kind of break the range, right? I just said, hey, there's no reason to kind of push it here, right? And this was right in here when I decided to sell this, and it's a decent amount lower. Now, eventually, will I want to buy it back? Sure, but I'm not in a rush to. It wasn't the biggest bounce for the day because the stock did finish down 2.7%. So I think what's better for this name is when everybody forgets about it for a little while, right? And maybe that's what the mode that we're in right now. I wanted to talk about gold and this crazy move in gold that happened. So number one, if you look at the bodies of these candles, right, that is a bearish engulfing candle. It also looks like kind of a rejection, maybe a blow off top. It's a lot of volume on that move. So that's why I mentioned, it's funny, before that move higher in gold happened, I talked about in the member video this weekend. Gold is tricky, right? Gold is not the easiest trade, right? Anything that goes sideways for 3 years, right? I chalk that up as to not an easy trade, right? And so just bear that in mind with gold. I think everybody getting excited about it, looking at those long-term charts, and I'm not saying gold is officially done here. I'm just saying we've kind of seen this before, right? We get to the top of this range, and buying at the top of the range in gold over the last 3 years, I know it hasn't worked. So, eventually, do I think it has a chance to break out, right, and move higher? I do. But, you really have to be patient with this thing because it's really hurt a lot of traders. I think then more traders have made money in it, given that how sideways it is. Bitcoin, on the other hand, impressive. Bitcoin, held the gains, right? And here's where we are in terms of a multi-year chart, right? So we're above, the 52-week highs, and I go to this weekly chart because I think it illustrates that we're above the value area, and maybe we're headed towards this 47,000 level. I also think Ethereum is not bad here. Right. I think Ethereum is actually, even though this is still inside value, I actually like Ethereum a little bit better here. Right. It's on the upper end of this this range, and I think it could push higher. So that's something to watch. I mentioned too, a trade over the weekend. Again, this is just a $9 stock. So it's not like this is going to be a great, going back to 52-week highs or anything like that. No, just a trade, right? Because people do trade crypto on this platform. So I would be looking for like a move to 1255, right? And if that doesn't happen by the end of the year, right, then the other thing to note is how slim the value area is for next year, meaning a decent move could happen. So again, we're not talking about a $50 stock, $100 stock. We're talking about a $9 stock, and a move to $12 is over a 20% move, right? So it's just a trade, right? Because I got a question about that or two. Other names that I thought were interesting today, outside of what we've talked about, is DoorDash. DoorDash is trying to break its value area for 2023. I did put on a trade in this. I put on a small position in this one. 95.82 is the level that I'm watching in this one. Also, Datadog was a name that saw call buying. Actually fared pretty well today. Was only down about a third of a percentage point, and you've got a nice level to trade against here. Now, again, this is a name that's run up a lot, but you could trade this versus 115, right? And if it breaks back into the value area for the month of December, you can get out of it. But I thought that was pretty interesting. The other group besides the banks, and we could look at the banks, by the way. I think this is more of a reversion to the mean trade than anything else, but it could continue to revert. Right? Where's the weekly chart? Right? I mean, we're still way below the value area, and we don't know, but that could be some type of a W pattern. That second low, it was a little bit higher than this one, so they could continue to revert back. I don't see that there's anything wrong with that. The biotech. Also same thing. This did make it into its value area, but really beaten up. But starting to kind of move, off of similar support that we've seen over the last couple of years. A couple of names that have been catching my eye. VKTX has been seeing some option activity, right? Again, these smaller biotech names are pretty. They are pretty speculative, right? And there's a lot of risk with them. And then one that I've been into for a while because it had some option activity. BBIO has been acting better. I held on to this one for a while, and I'm now finally positive in this trade. I think I must have added it in here, kind of just hung on to it. And there's a VPOC up there at 33.20. So that's it for now, for today's video. A lot more to kind of follow as the week develops, but I think that's it for tonight's video. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.